The wind manager is essentially your global wind component in Zephyr. The actual settings are relatively straightforward, but we're going to go through them just to make sure they're very clear. To start, you have a direction setting that lets you change which way the wind will blow, and a strength setting that lets you control how strong the wind is. You can see that as I move those two variables, you can see the changes reflected in the scene view. Going down to the base wind settings, this is a way that you can set whether the direction is set from the transform forward or a global or local vector. This just changes the way that the main direction is set. Let's say we want this to be set to a global vector instead. As we move the direction around, it does not change the rotation of our transform. This target wind strength is just a integer or float representation of the slider up here. So you can easily check what your actual value is at. The wind acceleration coefficient sets how fast the wind will transition to the new value when it's changed. And this wind noise texture sets the texture that will be used as the noise texture for the gusting, fluttering effects. Speaking of the gusting and fluttering, these are components that are added onto the base wind. In order to better see this, we're going to switch the debug mode to components. And now we can easily see each individual component of the wind in the vector. I'm going to go ahead and set these to 0 so that we can look at them in isolation. This pinkish vector tells you the base wind direction. This is a single static vector for every position in your world. It will always be pointing the same direction and will always be the same magnitude. In order to add variation, we have this thing called gusting. Now we can set a strength that is added on as this purple vector. You can see that there. The scale sets the scale of the noise texture. So a smaller value will have a noise texture that is a lot tighter, and a bigger value will have a bigger noise texture value. You can also set the speed of the noise texture to make the wind move faster through an area. This will not impact the speed of the wind as is impacted by the shaders. Lastly, we can set the gust pullback, which just sets an equilibrium point where if you have it a higher value, the gusting will tend to point the opposite direction of the main wind direction. If you have it set to 0, it'll generally face towards the wind vector. A good value is around 0.3 or 0.2, depending on your needs. Secondly, we have the fluttering component. This adds a horizontal component to the vector that lets the wind move back and forth, adding a bit of turbulence. Same thing, we can set the scale and speed of the texture, and you can see how that will change things. We can also set this to a higher value to get a wider variation spectrum. We could set this to a very high value or much lower. I would recommend around 0.2 for a good fluttering. Otherwise, the wind will look too chaotic. Lastly, we have the wind zones here. Here we can set a maximum amount of wind zones that will be considered by the C# API, and then a wind zone search radius. This radius is set around the main camera. So what this means is that wind zones that are more than 500 meters away from the main camera will not be considered when wind zones are added to C# effects.